The project in Clackmannanshire that was the subject of Dr. Tricky's research used the Thinking Through Philosophy programme by Paul Cleghorn. Of course, there are other resources available, such as Robert Fisher's Stories for Thinking and Sarah Stanley's But Why. More experienced facilitators create their own materials or use suitable picture books. There are many ways to begin to develop rigour in dialogue, and one is to have targets visible during a P4C session. The teaching points are chosen by the teacher, and the criteria relating to better dialogue are chosen by pupils in formative assessment fashion, after reflecting on their last dialogue.
Back's nice and straight so that we can give our full attention. Hands nice and steady. Very good. Now let's start first of all just by being aware of our feet inside our shoes. And then feel the weight of your body sitting on the chair. Excellent. Nice and still. Closing the skin. Nice and straight. Good boy. And if you're very still, see if you can feel the air touching your face and your hands. Very good. Now just be aware of what's in front of you. Without moving, just see the shapes and the different colours. And see if your attention can fill the whole room. Right up to the ceiling, out to the walls. Now let your listening run right out to the furthest and the softest sounds. Excellent, very good. Anyone like to say anything about that? How was that? How did you find that? How did you feel? Grant?
It felt quite relaxing.
Quite relaxing? More relaxed than before?
Yeah.
Yes, we were a bit nervous this morning though, weren't we? Okay. Anyone else? Lauren?
I could hear the chairs getting moved about outside.
Could you? Oh, you're not normally aware of that, are you? Why were we so aware of that just now? Joanna?
Because we were concentrating.
We were focusing, we were concentrating, weren't we? Well done.
I could hear the wind outside.
Well done, Ross. You don't normally hear the wind, do you?
No.
It's amazing what you can do when you give your attention to it, isn't it? One more, Angus.
I could hear the lights.
You could hear the lights. Can anyone say anything about how they felt? Not just about what they could hear or what they could see. Alexis?
Well, I felt still, like really still.
Where did you feel still?
In my body.
Just in your body?
And around me.
Shout to me.
And around me.
And around you. Did anyone else feel still? Anyone tell me where you felt still? Chelsea?
I felt still because my legs were still.
Can you shout, Chelsea?
I felt still because my legs were staying still.
Okay, so that was your body again. Joanna?
Well, my legs were really still.
Okay. How about inside? How about in your mind? Did anyone feel still in their mind? Oh, and you weren't going to tell me that? Oh, okay. Okay, hands down. Well done.
Mara, you've been working with a fifth year for several weeks. Have you noticed any changes over that time?
I think there's been a few changes to them. One of them is in terms of the dynamics of that class and not just in the philosophy lessons when we're set up in this particular style, because they're very, it's a very mixed class, and when I first took them on they were quite cliquey. There were clearly dominant characters in there who I think without the philosophical dialogue lessons they would have continued to dominate. And I think it's a common problem, in classes that you get 5 or 6 kids that do the talking and nobody else does. And often they're the ones that are really, they're the only ones who are doing the thinking as well. And it's changed their response to being in class. It's changed their relationships in that everybody's included in these lessons, so they have to acknowledge one another and they have to open themselves up. There's a sense,
So that's it, developing the class ethos as well through that change in...
very much so. I mean, partly, the structure of those lessons where you have to take turns and everybody has the right to be listened to. When I started teaching them, they would talk over one another, and it's the biggest voices are the ones that get heard. But here, they've become accustomed to listening to one another. And I think what you don't get in a normal classroom is that they actually take time to think about what other people have said and take other people's opinions on board. And you very rarely see that. Do you know what I mean? So much of teaching is, okay, this is the idea, have you got it? Can you reproduce it? And from an English teacher's point of view, that's not what you want, because that's not a child who's going to perform well, in terms of the English curriculum.
Related to that, I was going to ask you whether you think their ability to interrogate text has changed, because in some English schools, they had the literacy hour, and schools that had started philosophical inquiry, the teachers were saying that they found the youngsters were naturally better able to do that. At this higher level, do you think that's the case?
I think it does, because running through the Scottish English curriculum is this idea about their relationship with language, and what they really need to do well is to have precision. They need to be able to identify very precisely which word or phrase is it that a writer is using that means that, and what is your reaction to that. And because here what we do is this kind of relentless search for meaning, and this kind of looking beyond the surface meaning, is equipping them to handle language in a way that the normal curriculum doesn't, and I'm not saying this should replace normal teaching, but working hand in hand. I think there are direct applications with what we need from students from an English teacher's point of view, and and it's partly also from an emotional intelligence point of view, the way these children are able to relate to one another. One of the other things that they've got is they have to justify what they say, and this is exactly what we want from English. We have to say, okay, well, you're saying this means that, but what is the evidence for this? And I think the skill that within the Scottish Higher that they find hard is to evaluate, is to have their own relationship with text and say, how has this affected me? And because, we have, these huge, wide-ranging discussions, but it really is forcing the individual to think about what are my opinions and to be able to test those out in relation to the rest of the world. So I think from that point of view it's been really valuable.
You went into there the difference between having philosophical inquiry as a process through which we uncover philosophical issues and go down that trail, but also there's using the dialogical method to deliver the curriculum. I wonder how within English you...
Well, I originally chose stimuli. First of all, I deliberately chose ones that weren't of a literary nature, because I didn't want them to respond to me as an English teacher, because there's a perception that the teacher knows the answers, and so they're going to respond in a particular way to that, rather than coming at it from a completely different perspective and saying, well, it's my ideas about that. The teacher doesn't know the answer, and neither do I. But I deliberately chose stimuli that thematically were related to the ideas that we were examining in the text that we were looking at. So the initial stimuli would feed into and develop their thinking around, the issues that we were trying to get at the heart of in the text, and they were making those links. I think one of the best things that they did was very early on, because there's a requirement in English Higher to do personal study, and the students have to pose their own question, and I was trying to put across to them, the importance of the question you ask, because you have got to hit these criteria. If you don't ask a particular question, then you're not going to be able to pass this unit simply because you haven't planned for how you're going to answer it. And from the very first questions that they did, they were able to evaluate their ability to ask questions, and they were able to evaluate and say, well, that question actually wasn't very good, because it led us down this particular line of thinking, and that wasn't very helpful for dialogue. And so I was then able to intervene and to say, right, now you can relate that to, asking questions. And also, again, close reading and text analysis, essentially comprehension exercises, and it makes them analyse the question. And I think, a lot of children fail by simply not answering the question, not getting what is it this question is asking me to do. And again, it's that precision with language, and at the heart of philosophical inquiry for me, anyway, it's about our ability to express our ideas in language. And I think the other thing they're getting out of it is they are developing their own language, and we are teaching in a language-deprived area, and it's a huge problem across this school that many of our kids do not have a vocabulary that is tuned to passing English higher, exactly, and they're not readers. And using the support of the teacher, you are able to develop their ability to understand particular concepts and give names to them, and to uncover the assumptions behind different concepts.
You've made several points about the effectiveness of the method. Do you think there's any impact on the engagement of the students with the subject?
With my subject, or with philosophy?
With your subject. So that using the dialogical method, is there any evidence, do you think, that it actually there's greater engagement, or does it not make any difference?
But I think one of the things you get from philosophy is you get a different relationship with your teacher, and that really affects how well children do in school in your subject. It really does, because of the way they relate to you in a different way, and they have a positive experience of being in here. They have acknowledgement of their opinions and what they say, that it counts. To that extent, yes, I think it does.
You've got 6 international students in the class. What's been your observation of them as they've struggled to learn a new language and at the same time develop their thinking?
I think it's been absolutely fascinating, and again, if we take an emotional intelligence point of view, these that group of students have been able to be included in the class, which I think was very difficult for them to start off with. Partly they only came halfway through the year, and so the class to an extent was established before they came as a group, so it was very hard for them to find a way and to find a space. And it really is during these philosophy lessons that the other students actually noticed them. I think they would have been quite happy and prepared to dismiss them out of hand, that they were the outsiders. But it's listening to them in philosophy that has changed, the kind of mutual respect for them. But I think, looking at them, I think it's absolutely astonishing what it's done for their second language acquisition. It really is, because clearly at the beginning they were translating and they were finding it hard, and I was pairing them with first English speakers, and I think partly the structure of the lessons helped them in that they could speak and in a small group and then get their voice out there. Yeah, very much so. But they're saying now, I'm not translating, I'm not doing processing, I'm thinking in English. I can't say for a fact, but I don't think that would have happened as quickly. I think that might have been best case scenario at the end of this year for them. But, you know, we're only partway through the year and already they're doing it. And, you know, and it has to be said, these are very bright kids. They are very bright kids. But, I mean, they are passing the higher English assessments in a second language. So, I mean, and I think that the other students are acknowledging that they really are doing so much more. They're kind of saying, no, this is really hard for me. This is really, really testing my ability. And they've gained this respect for these other students because they can see that's a really hard thing. I mean, there's a whole fascinating issue about what's going to happen with them when they go back into thinking in a philosophical way in their first language and whether or not they're going to do it. But yeah,
had evidence of that would be really
yeah. But I mean, I think that experience, I think that we're going to be able to use because we are going to have more and more English second language speakers who are not here just as exchange students, who are here as part of our cohort. And we need, you know, and quite urgently, we need to be able to find ways to include these students into what we do, and we need very rapidly to have strategies in place for improving kids' English second language. And at the moment, the structures aren't there, and we need to find ways of doing that. And, you know, I'm certainly going to be promoting philosophical inquiry as a way of doing that.
Jackie, you've taken responsibility to develop philosophical inquiry in Lawnshill Academy as a special project. Why did you choose philosophical inquiry?
Well, it started off with a Superior Level 1 training day, which many of us attended from Lawnshill. And during that day, I saw an inquiry take place. And during that inquiry, I saw an energy that I hadn't seen in education for a long time. I saw an enthusiasm for the pursuit of ideas that I hadn't seen for many, many years in schools. And I liked, in addition, the respect that a philosophical inquiry needed to have at the centre of it, you know, so that pupils were respecting each other. The openness that is central to philosophical inquiry seemed to me to be something that we all